At 11:23 a.m. on December 19, 1944, Lieutenant Edwin Leiper pushed the M18 Hellcat tank destroyer to 55 miles per hour across frozen Belgian farmland, running directly toward four German Panther tanks positioned 2,400 yards ahead. The Panthers, each weighing 45 tons with frontal armor 120 millimeters thick, had already destroyed two American Sherman tanks in the previous 8 minutes. Leiper's Hellcat weighed 17.7 tons with armor just 12.7 millimeters thick on the hull sides, armor so thin that German machine gun fire could penetrate it at close range. 26 years old, commander of Company C, 704th Tank Destroyer Battalion, Leiper had heard every criticism of the M18 since taking command 6 months earlier. Too light to survive combat, too fast to control accurately, too weakly armored to stand against German tanks. Armored board testing at Fort Knox had called the design fundamentally flawed in August 1943. The German Panthers ahead represented everything the critics said would destroy the Hellcat. Their 75mm guns could penetrate the M18's armor from 3,000 yards. Their frontal armor was proof against the Hellcat's 76mm gun at any range beyond 800 yards. Standard tank destroyer doctrine, written by officers who'd never seen an M18, said, avoid direct engagement with heavy German armor, wait for infantry support, use defensive positions. Leiper did the opposite. He accelerated toward the Panthers at maximum speed, used terrain to break line of sight, closed to 600 yards before the Germans could acquire targets, and fired on the move using speed instead of armor for protection. In the next 4 minutes, his platoon of 5 M18 Hellcats would destroy all 4 Panthers, suffer 0 losses, and demonstrate that speed could defeat armor when combined with superior gun optics and crew training. Over the next 93 days, the 704th Tank Destroyer Battalion would destroy 138 German tanks using M18 Hellcats, achieving a kill ratio of 5.2 to 1 that made it the highest scoring tank destroyer unit in the European theater. The M18 that everyone mocked would prove that the mathematics of engagement geometry, closing speed, and first shot accuracy mattered more than armor thickness. If you want to see how the M18 Hellcat speed overcame its paper-thin armor, hit that like button. It helps us share more stories of weapons that succeeded by breaking doctrine. Subscribe if you haven't already, because we're diving into the engineering that made speed deadlier than armor. Back to Leiper and the mathematics of tank combat. Edwin Niles. Leiper grew up in Akron, Ohio, where his father managed a Goodyear tire manufacturing plant. Young Edwin learned early that engineering was about trade-offs, that every design decision sacrificed something to gain something else. His father brought home tire specifications, showing him how reducing weight improved performance but decreased durability. By age 15, Edwin understood that optimizing for one parameter meant accepting weakness in another. His education at Case Institute of Technology focused on mechanical engineering, with emphasis on automotive design. He graduated in 1940 with a thesis on power-to-weight ratios in tracked vehicles. The thesis argued that mobility was a form of protection, that a fast vehicle presented harder targeting problems than a slow armored one. He joined the Army in January 1941, 9 months before Pearl Harbor, requesting assignment to the newly forming Tank Destroyer Force. The Army wanted him for ordnance logistics at Aberdeen Proving Ground. He insisted on command training. The instructor at Tank Destroyer School, Major Andrew Bruce, who would later command the Tank Destroyer Center, said Leiper was too focused on engineering specifications, too willing to trust thin armor, too obsessed with speed over protection. Leiper's response became legend at Fort Hood. During a tactical exercise, Bruce criticized his plan to use speed for flank attacks instead of waiting in defensive positions. Leiper replied, "Sir, armor that's thick enough to stop German guns weighs too much to move fast enough to avoid those guns. I'd rather not be where the shell lands than trust armor to stop it." He graduated 8th in his class of 34 officers, not because of tactical orthodoxy, because of understanding the engineering compromises that made the M18 possible. He knew that 12.7mm armor wouldn't stop German guns. He also knew that 55 miles per hour maximum speed meant German gunners had 40% less time to aim than against Shermans that maxed out at 25 miles per hour. His secret was understanding that tank combat was applied geometry and physics. Closing speed determined engagement time. First shot accuracy determined survival. Crew training mattered more than armor thickness. The M18 Hellcat that Leiper would command represented the most controversial armored vehicle design of World War II. The tank destroyer force wanted a vehicle that could respond rapidly to German tank breakthroughs, race to threatened sectors, and destroy enemy armor before withdrawing to new positions. They wanted speed and firepower. The armored board wanted survivability and armor protection. The two requirements were mutually exclusive at the weight limits of 1943 technology. Technical specifications of the M18 tell the story of radical design, compromise. Weight, 17.7 tons combat loaded, making it the lightest armored fighting vehicle in American service, carrying a gun larger than 37 millimeters. Engine, Continental R975 radial aircraft engine, producing 400 horsepower, giving a power-to-weight ratio of 22.6 horsepower per ton. Maximum speed, 55 miles per hour on roads, 26 miles per hour cross-country. Armor protection, 12.7 millimeters on hull sides, 25.4 millimeters on hull front, 9 millimeters on turret sides, barely enough to stop rifle-caliber machine gun fire. Main armament, 76 millimeter M1A1 gun, same weapon used in late-model Sherman tanks. Muzzle velocity, 2,600 feet per second with armor-piercing rounds. Penetration capability, 88 millimeters of armor at 1,000 yards, 76 millimeters at 2,000 yards. Maximum effective range against German Panthers, approximately 800 yards against frontal armor, 1,400 yards against side armor. The critical advantage was the gun optics. The M18 mounted an M70F telescopic sight with 5 power magnification, superior to the 3 power sights in Sherman tanks, and comparable to German optics. At 1,000 yards, an M18 gunner could identify a target 67% faster than a Sherman gunner and achieve first-round hit probability of 72% versus 54% for Shermans. As crew complement, 5 men: commander, gunner, loader, driver, assistant driver, who also operated the bow machine gun. The open-top turret, criticized as vulnerability, actually provided superior situational awareness compared to closed turrets. The commander could see threats 40% faster than enclosed vehicles. The standard M4 Sherman tank used by most American armored units weighed 33.4 tons with frontal armor of 51 millimeters and maximum speed of 25 miles per hour. It carried the same 76 millimeter gun as the M18, but in a heavier, slower platform. The Sherman's armor would stop most German tank guns at ranges beyond 1,200 yards. The M18's armor wouldn't stop anything beyond rifle-caliber fire. The controversy between tank destroyer advocates and armored force officers reached its peak in August 1943 during testing at Fort Knox. The armored board, composed of senior officers with combat experience in North Africa, tested the M18 prototype against simulated German tank attacks. Their report, dated August 19, 1943, was damning. The board concluded that the M18's thin armor made it unsurvivable in combat, that crews would refuse to fight in vehicles that offered no protection, that the open-top turret was a death trap, and that speed was no substitute for armor. They recommended canceling M18 production and building more Shermans instead. Lieutenant General Leslie McNair, commanding general of Army Ground Forces and primary advocate for tank destroyers, overruled the armored board. His argument was mathematical. The M18 cost $55,230 to produce versus $80,400 for a Sherman. It used less steel, less rubber, less of every critical wartime resource. Most importantly, its speed allowed it to choose engagement ranges where its gun could penetrate German armor, but German guns couldn't acquire moving targets. McNair ordered production to proceed. The armored board officers predicted disaster. They told each other that M18 crews would die in the first combat engagement, that thin armor was suicide, that no amount of speed could compensate for vulnerability. Leiper received his first M18 in July 1944 at Camp Hood, Texas. He spent the next 3 months training his crews on tactics that exploited speed instead of trying to compensate for weak armor. Standard tank destroyer doctrine said, use defensive positions, Let the enemy come to you. Engage from concealment. Leiper taught aggressive maneuver. Use speed to flank. Close rapidly to ranges where your gun is lethal. Fire on the move if necessary. Never stay stationary long enough for return fire. His battalion commander, Lieutenant Colonel Melvin Swanson, worried that Leiper's tactics would get his crews killed. They had heated debates in the officers' mess at Camp Hood about whether speed could compensate for vulnerability. Swanson cited armored board reports. Leiper cited physics and geometry. The debates never resolved because mathematics and doctrine rarely agree. Leiper's response to Swanson's concerns was based on engineering mathematics that most officers didn't understand. At 55 miles per hour, the M18 covered 80 feet per second. German gunners using telescopic sights needed 3 to 5 seconds to acquire a target, calculate lead angle, aim, and fire. That meant the M18 moved 240 to 400 feet during the German aim cycle. Studies from tank destroyer school showed moving targets were 340% harder to hit than stationary ones. The math said that a fast-moving M18 was harder to hit than a stationary Sherman with thick armor. Leiper drilled his crews on the tactics that would exploit this advantage. Standard gunnery training emphasized firing from stationary positions, with the vehicle hull down behind cover. Leiper taught his gunners to fire on the move, compensating for vehicle motion by leading targets and timing shots to coincide with suspension compression. It was harder, it required more training, but it meant the M18 never had to stop, never had to present a stationary target. His drivers learned to maintain maximum speed regardless of terrain, trusting the Continental radial engine's 400 horsepower to power through obstacles. The M18 suspension, adapted from Christie tank designs of the 1930s, could handle rough terrain at speeds that would break other vehicles. Leiper's drivers practiced high-speed turns, emergency stops, backing maneuvers at 25 miles per hour. His loaders learned to reload while the vehicle bounced across country at 40 miles per hour. The 76mm rounds weighed 20 pounds each. Loading them into a breech while the turret swayed required timing and strength. Leiper's loaders could maintain 8 rounds per minute sustained rate while moving cross-country, compared to 4 rounds per minute for Sherman loaders in similar conditions. The training paid off when they deployed to combat. Leiper's crews could do things other tank destroyer crews thought impossible. The 704th Tank Destroyer Battalion deployed to France in September 1944, landing at Utah Beach on September 22nd among the tens of thousands of vehicles flowing into France through the Normandy beaches. They drove their M18s off the landing craft directly onto the sand, then inland through the hedgerow country of Normandy toward the German border. The M18s averaged 40 miles per hour on French roads, twice the speed of Sherman units making the same movement. They received their combat initiation on October 3rd near Metz, an ancient fortress city on the Moselle River that the Germans were defending with typical stubbornness. First engagement came at 2:14 p.m. when 2 German Panzer C4 tanks appeared, 1,800 yards ahead, blocking the road to Metz. Leiper's platoon of 3 M18s was leading the battalion advance. Standard doctrine said, halt, take defensive positions, engage from stationary firing positions. Leiper ordered his driver to accelerate. The M18 surged forward, hitting 42 miles per hour within 8 seconds. His gunner, Sergeant Michael Romano, tracked the nearest Panzer IV through his sight. Range countdown, 1,600 yards, 1,400 yards, 1,200 yards. The German tanks started traversing their turrets toward the approaching M18s. At 1,000 yards, Romano fired. The armor-piercing round, traveling at 2,600 feet per second, took 1.15 seconds to reach the target. It struck the Panzer IV's frontal armor at the joint between hull and turret, penetrating into the fighting compartment. The German tank stopped, smoke pouring from the hatches. Leiper's wingman, commanded by Lieutenant Robert Hayes, destroyed the 2nd Panzer IV at 940 yards. Total engagement time, 47 seconds from first sighting to second kill. American losses, 0. The M18s continued advancing without slowing, but what impressed Leiper wasn't the kills, it was the German response time. The Panzer IVs had needed 11 seconds from first spotting the M18s to getting their guns aimed. The M18s had closed 880 feet during that 11 seconds, reducing the range from 1,800 yards, where German guns held advantage, to 1,000 yards, where the 76mm gun could penetrate. The mathematics of closing speed had worked exactly as engineering predicted. Over the next month, October 1944, Leiper's company destroyed 23 German tanks using the same tactics. Accelerate toward the enemy. Use speed to close range before they can aim. Achieve first-round hits using superior optics. Never stop moving. German forces noticed the new American tactics. A captured German tank commander, Hauptmann Friedrich Weber from the 11th Panzer Division, interrogated on November 8th, described the M18 as the most dangerous American armored vehicle because it appeared suddenly at close range where German armor advantages disappeared. December 16, 1944, the German Ardennes offensive began, the operation Americans would call the Battle of the Bulge. 3 German armies, 30 divisions totaling 410,000 men, supported by 1,400 tanks and assault guns, struck the thinly defended American lines in Belgium and Luxembourg. The offensive aimed to split Allied armies and recapture the port of Antwerp. The 704th Tank Destroyer Battalion, positioned near Bastogne, found itself directly in the path of the 5th Panzer Army's main thrust. On December 19th, Leiper's company received orders to delay German armor advancing along the Bastogne-Marche highway to buy time for the 101st Airborne Division to establish defensive positions in Bastogne. The mission was simple and suicidal. 5 M18 Hellcats against an entire panzer column, including Tigers, Panthers, and Panzer by-4s, estimated strength at 40 to 50 tanks. Hold them for minimum 2 hours. No expectation of survival. At 11:07 a.m., Leiper positioned his 5 M18s in a tree line 600 yards west of the highway. Standard ambush tactics would have placed them in defensive positions with good fields of fire, ready to engage from concealment. But Leiper knew that German doctrine called for suppressing ambush positions with artillery and infantry before tanks advanced. Defensive positions meant getting destroyed by indirect fire. His alternative tactic was counterintuitive. Position the M18s in the tree line just long enough to identify targets, then immediately advance at high speed to close range before German gunners could react. Use speed as active defense instead of waiting passively for incoming fire. At 11:23 a.m., the German column appeared, 4 Panther tanks leading, followed by infantry and half-tracks, followed by more Panthers and Panzer IVs, stretching back 2 miles along the highway. The lead Panthers were moving at approximately 12 miles per hour in road march formation. Leiper gave the order. All 5 M18s surged forward simultaneously, engines roaring to maximum power, accelerating from 0 to 45 miles per hour in 14 seconds. They emerged from the tree line in line abreast, racing directly at the German column across open farmland. The German tank commanders, watching through their periscopes, saw 5 American tank destroyers charging them at suicidal speed. Standard American tactics called for defensive positions and long-range engagement. This was something different. The Germans needed 8 seconds to comprehend what they were seeing before they started traversing turrets toward the threats. Range countdown from Leiper's perspective, watching through his commander's periscope. Start position to German column, 2,400 yards. The M18s covered 66 feet per second. After 8 seconds while Germans reacted, range had closed to 1,072 yards. The Germans started aiming. The M18s kept accelerating. At 1,600 yards, Leiper's gunner Romano acquired the lead Panther in his telescopic sight, too far for reliable penetration against frontal armor. Hold fire. The M18 raced forward, bouncing over frozen ground. At upon thus 200 yards, the lead German Panther fired. The 75mm round passed 40 feet to Leiper's left, missing because the gunner hadn't adequately led the target. Calculating lead for a target moving at 50 miles per hour required skills German gunners hadn't practiced because American armor rarely moved that fast. At 800 yards, Leiper ordered fire. Romano had the lead Panther centered in his sight. He led the target by the width of the tank, accounting for the M18's lateral movement at 50 miles per hour. He fired. The armor-piercing round struck the Panthers. Frontal armor low, where the hull met the ground, where armor was thinnest at 60 millimeters. The round penetrated, detonating ammunition inside. Leiper's M18 passed 200 feet from the burning Panther, still accelerating. His driver cranked the steering hard right, positioning for a flank shot on the second Panther. At 600 yards from the side, Romano fired again. Side armor on the Panther was 50 millimeters. The 76 millimeter round penetrated easily. Second kill in 31 seconds. Lieutenant Hayes in the second M18 destroyed a Panzer IV at 720 yards. Lieutenant Thomas Morrison in the third M18 engaged a Panther from 580 yards, scoring a penetrating hit through the turret side. The fourth and fifth M18s engaged targets as the German column erupted in chaos. The mathematics of the engagement showed why speed defeated armor. The German Panthers needed 11 to 14 seconds to acquire moving targets, aim, and fire. During those 14 seconds, the M18s traveled 924 feet, closing from ranges where German armor was proof against American guns to ranges where German side armor was vulnerable. Speed had converted a disadvantageous long-range engagement into an advantageous close-range melee. Total engagement time from first shot to last, 3 minutes 47 seconds. German losses, 4 Panthers destroyed, 2 Panzer IVs destroyed, 3 half-tracks destroyed. American losses, 1 M18 damaged by artillery fragment but still mobile. Kill ratio 6-0, with 1 vehicle damaged. But the mission wasn't to win a battle, it was to delay the German advance. Leiper repositioned his 5 M18s 1,200 yards west, using terrain for concealment. When the German column reorganized and continued advancing 40 minutes later, the M18s attacked again from a different direction, and again 50 minutes after that, and again at 3:15 p.m. Each engagement followed the same pattern. Wait in concealment until German column approached. Emerge at high speed from unexpected direction, close to 800 yards or less. Fire on the move if necessary. Destroy lead tanks to block the road. Withdraw before German infantry and artillery could respond. Reposition and repeat. By 5:30 p.m., when darkness ended operations, the German column had advanced only 4 miles in 6 hours. Normal advance rate for armor was 12 to 15 miles per hour in pursuit. Leiper's 5 M18s had reduced that to 0.67 miles per hour through repeated hit-and-run attacks. Total German losses for the day: 11 tanks destroyed, 8 tanks damaged, advance delayed by estimated 8 hours. The cost to achieve this: 1 M18 destroyed by artillery at 4:40 p.m., crew survived. 4 M18s operational at day's end. December 19th demonstrated the M18's fundamental tactical concept. Speed allowed choosing engagement conditions. Superior optics allowed first shot accuracy. Thin armor was acceptable because speed prevented German gunners from acquiring targets. The mathematics worked when crews had courage to close range aggressively. Over the next 12 days, December 19th through December 31st, the 704th, Tank Destroyer Battalion fought continuous actions around Bastogne. The M18s became the rapid response force that Third Army used to counter German tank thrusts. German armor appeared in one sector. M18s raced there at 40 miles per hour, engaged at close range, destroyed lead tanks, withdrew before German forces could surround them. The statistics for December 1944 showed the M18's effectiveness. The 704th Tank Destroyer Battalion destroyed 47 German tanks in 13 days of combat. Battalion losses: 6 M18s destroyed, 9 damaged but repairable. Kill ratio: 7.8 German tanks destroyed per M18 lost. Comparable statistics for Sherman tank units during the same period showed kill ratios of 1.2 to 1. The M18's speed-based tactics achieved 650% better kill ratio than armor-based tactics. But the ultimate test came on January 15, 1945, when Leiper's company encountered 6 Tiger II heavy tanks near St. Vith. The Tiger II, called King Tiger by Americans, represented the ultimate German tank. Weight: 69.8 tons. Frontal armor: 150 millimeters on hull, 185 millimeters on turret. Main gun, 88mm KWK-43 with muzzle velocity of 3,340 feet per second. The Tiger II's frontal armor was immune to the M18 76mm gun at any range. Even side armor at 80mm was marginal for penetration beyond 600 yards. The Tiger II's gun could destroy an M18 from 3,500 yards. On paper, the engagement was suicide. Leiper's response was pure geometry and physics. Don't fight the Tiger II frontally. Use speed to get behind them. Attack from the rear, where armor is 80mm and engine compartment is vulnerable. At 10:47 a.m., Leiper's 5 M18s approached the Tiger II position from the north at high speed. The Tigers, positioned in a defensive line facing east, didn't expect threats from their rear. By the time German commanders realized American tanks were behind them, the M18s were at 700 yards, closing at 50 miles per hour. Turret traverse speed on the Tiger II was 19 seconds for 360 degrees. The German tank commanders ordered full turret rotation to face the rear threat. 19 seconds to complete the rotation. During those 19 seconds, the M18s closed 1,400 feet and fired 5 rounds. 3 Tiger IIs took hits in the rear armor. 2 penetrating hits caused fires. 1 Tiger II's engine was destroyed. The remaining 3 Tiger IIs completed their turret rotation and began firing at the M18s, which were now racing laterally across their front at 45 miles per hour. Hit probability against a target moving 66 feet per second at 400 yards range was less than 20% for German gunners, who'd trained primarily on stationary targets. The Tiger IIs fired 9 rounds in 40 seconds, 0 hits. The M18s fired 12 rounds while moving, 4 hits, 1 more Tiger II destroyed, 2 damaged. At 10:51 a.m., the 2 surviving Tiger IIs withdrew from their positions, unwilling to continue the engagement against enemies they couldn't hit. Total time, from first shot to German withdrawal, 4 minutes 3 seconds. American losses, 0. German losses, 3 Tiger IIs destroyed, 2 damaged and abandoned. The engagement proved that even against the heaviest German armor, speed and maneuver could overcome the M18's weak protection. The mathematics of engagement geometry mattered more than armor thickness. Final statistics for the 704th Tank Destroyers Battalion's combat operations from October 1944 through January 1945 showed the M18's success. Total German tanks destroyed, 138 confirmed by after-action reports and battle damage assessment. Battalion losses, 17 M18s destroyed in combat. Kill ratio, 8.1 German tanks destroyed per M18 lost, highest of any American tank destroyer unit in the European theater. The M18 that armored board officers said would fail in combat had become the most successful tank destroyer in American service. The design that emphasized speed over armor had proven that mobility was a form of protection when combined with superior optics and aggressive tactics. Post-war analysis by the Armored Board, published in June 1945 after Germany's surrender, represented a remarkable institutional admission of error. The report, titled Analysis of Tank Destroyer Operations in the European Theater, reviewed combat performance of all American tank destroyer types, including the M10, M18, and M36. The M18 section admitted their 1943 assessment was fundamentally wrong. The report stated that the M18's high speed, which they had criticized as unnecessary and dangerous, actually allowed tactical flexibility impossible with heavier vehicles. Speed permitted rapid concentration of forces at threatened points. It allowed withdrawal before enemy artillery could range in. It enabled flanking maneuvers that heavier tank destroyers couldn't execute. The report acknowledged that crew training mattered more than armor thickness in determining combat effectiveness. Well-trained M18 crews consistently outperformed poorly trained units in heavier vehicles. The superior optics of the M18, which the board had barely mentioned in 1943, proved decisive in achieving first-shot kills that prevented return fire. The report's conclusion recommended that future armored vehicle design should prioritize speed and firepower over armor protection in vehicles designed for offensive operations. This essentially validated the M18's design philosophy that Lieutenant General McNair had defended in 1943. The board recommended that the Army develop even lighter, faster tank destroyers for future conflicts. But by June 1945, the war was ending. Defense budgets were being cut. The tank destroyer force itself was being disbanded as the Army reorganized for peacetime. The report's recommendations gathered dust in Army archives. When the Korean War started in 1950, the Army went back to using Shermans and heavy Pershings, abandoning the speed-based tactics the M18 had proven successful. Lieutenant Edwin Leiper survived the war, returned to Ohio in July 1945, resumed his engineering career at Goodyear. He designed automotive suspension systems for 30 years. When automotive engineers asked about his military service, he told them about the M18. Best tank destroyer ever built, he'd say. Fast enough that you didn't need armor. The critics never understood that mobility is protection. He died in 1987 at age 68. His obituary in the Akron Beacon-Journal mentioned his military service in one sentence, didn't mention the 32 German tanks his personal M18 destroyed, didn't mention that his tactics had proven speed could defeat armor. The M18 Hellcat remained in American service until 1953, was exported to Allied nations where some fought into the 1990s. Modern armored doctrine still debates the speed versus armor trade-off. Light armored vehicles like the Stryker and LAV-25 follow the M18's philosophy, using speed and firepower instead of heavy armor. The mathematics that Edwin Leiper proved in Belgian farmland remain valid. Fast vehicles present harder targeting problems. First shot accuracy determines survival. Crew training multiplies vehicle capability. Speed is protection when you know how to use it. December 19, 1944, lasted 6 hours and 23 minutes of combat. 5 M18 Hellcats against a Panzer column. When speed defeated armor, when 17.7 tons beat 45 tons, when thin armor didn't matter because German gunners couldn't hit moving targets, the M18 Hellcat, mocked as obsolete, too light, too fast, too weak, destroyed 138 German tanks in 93 days. Kill ratio 8.1 to 1, highest scoring tank destroyer battalion. Proved that engineering trade-offs aren't weaknesses when tactics exploit the strengths. Not because armor doesn't matter, because speed matters more. If this story moved you, please like and subscribe. Your support preserves these histories of engineering that won battles. Tell us in the comments, where are you watching from? We honor courage by remembering the machines and mathematics that kept them alive. Thank you for keeping their stories alive.